Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Love From Lizi's January 2021 card kit. The theme is Fresh Start. I will have links provided in the description box if you are interested in purchasing the kit or signing up to subscribe. As I'm recording this voiceover, the kit is still available, but since it is a monthly kit, quantities are always limited. Let's go ahead and get started with card number 1. For the background, I'm using this beautiful pattern paper. It has a very large image. I cut it down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And I'm going to layer that on some of this beautiful pink pearlescent paper. I did cut out a rectangle out of the center of that just to save for another card. The pearlescent paper is one of the add-on bundles that you can purchase along with the January release. I love using the beautiful specialty cardstock on my cards. And then I did layer it again with some dark green cardstock, and this is some cardstock from my stash. I decided to add a little extra detail to the card. The panel is beautiful on its own, but it never hurts to add just something extra. So I have a small scallop border die, put some score tape on the back and adhered it to the lower portion of the card. And then for some extra shine, I'm adding a Love From Lizi Racing Green Mirror Peel Off. The kit includes a lovely stamp set that has 4 different sentiments. So I decided to use the Fresh Start sentiment. I stamped it on some of the extra pattern paper from this panel. So it's not white, it has a little bit of a pink watercolor look to it. I'll pop that up using some thin foam squares and adhere it to the left-hand side of the card. For a finishing touch, I'm going to use some of the glitter enamel dots that are included in the kit. The colors are beautiful and they're super sparkly. I'm using one of the pinks. I'll put 2 of them under the sentiment, 1 above the sentiment. I was trying to decide if I wanted to use the larger size, but I changed my mind. I ended up going back to the medium and just the small size. And I did lay them on real lightly at first in case I was going to change my mind. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 1. With such a pretty pattern paper, it really didn't need anything else. Now moving on to card number 2, another beautiful pattern paper. A little on the busy side. I'm going to use it for the background. So I'm going to layer this on that same dark green cardstock. And the kit includes a whole bunch of vellum letters. So I decided to use the letter B. And since I do want it to stand out, I decided to put it on some of the gray cardstock that's included in the kit. It can be tricky to adhere vellum without any of the adhesive showing. So I decided I'm going to have an oval frame around it. And to create that frame, I just used 2 different sizes of oval dies. There are some areas on the vellum that isn't see-through. So where the leaves, the flowers, and the actual letter are, you can put some adhesive and it's not going to show. I'm putting a very light amount of liquid adhesive in those areas and also just a little bit around the outside edge since it is going to be covered up with this frame. So I'll use my tweezers and add some liquid adhesive to the back side of my green frame and then adhere it on top of the letter B. And just to make sure that's going to hold, I am going to place my acrylic block on top and let that dry for a moment. So once that's all dry, I can adhere it to my card, and I decided not to add a matted layer around that gray cardstock. I'm just going to adhere it directly onto the card. Trying to get it nice and centered. And I still wanted to add a little more detail, so I'm going to use the peel-offs that are included in the kit. This is the mink color, and it has a silver finish on it, so it's really pretty. It's a brand new color that Lizi just introduced. I'm using the thinnest width and putting one around the outside edge of this panel. Fairly close to the edge, but not right on top of the edge. I'll cut the strips just a little bit wider than the card panel. Put one on top and then one on the bottom. So this is creating a frame all around the card front. Now I'm going to take an X-Acto knife and press it into the corners So I'm mitering the edges, and now I'm going to have this nice clean finish. I'll just pull away those extra pieces. And I do give the corners another little press after I've removed those extra pieces, just to make sure they're not going to lift off later. So there's that beautiful frame created. It adds such a nice detail. It's a trick that I learned from Lizi. I'm going to put my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. I'll add happy birthday for the sentiment. I'll have the birthday word going over the lower portion of that large B. I'm going to pop it up using some more of those foam squares, and then I'll adhere it to the card. And I stamped both the sentiments on that same gray cardstock. I felt the white was just a little too bright. And I am leaving that little gap where it's going over the oval, just so it doesn't have that extra little bump there. And for a finishing touch, I'm using some of the sequins that are included in the kit. And I'm using just the cream color. I think it matches nicely with the background. So I'll put 2 of them in the upper left-hand corner and then 3 in the lower right-hand corner. And the kit includes just a sample size bag of the sequins. If you really like sequins, you can always purchase the full size bag as an add-on. I notice when I usually use sequins, I stick with one color. I find when I use more than one color, it seems too busy for me. When I look at other people's cards that use multiple colors, I think their cards look great. So strange how things look different for your own cards. Now moving on to card number 3. I'm using a card sketch from MFT. This is number 518. I have this beautiful floral paper for the background, and then some green paper with a pink peach color polka dot on it. I'm going to use some of the peel-offs from the kit. I have the widest width. I'm going to put one on the edge of this green polka dot paper. I do like to trim them a little bit longer, and then I'll just wrap the ends behind. Then I'll put this panel onto some cardstock. I'm going to use some of the green pearlescent paper this time. And I did cut out that centerpiece to save for another card. I am going to fill in that gap just using some white cardstock that I have on hand. I'll put my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the card base showing. And most of my cardstock layers are an additional 1/8 of an inch to the measurements listed on the sketch. For the image, I'm going to use one of the floral ephemera pieces that's included in the kit. And I'll adhere it to a stitched circle die cut. I use some of the pink pearlescent paper for that. Just glue the ephemera piece directly on top of that circle die cut. I'm going to add a piece of scrap cardstock to the upper portion underneath that circle, since it goes off of that polka dot paper, just trying to keep all of the layers even. And I'll adhere that to the card. For the sentiment, I've already stamped out happy birthday, and I wasn't sure if I wanted it going over the image as it's indicated on the sketch, or if I wanted to have it a little bit lower. I'm just holding it onto the card loosely so I could cut the angle on the right hand side. And then I'll cut my little fishtail on the left-hand side. I did cut it shorter than what's indicated in the sketch, and I ended up not liking that. I felt it was definitely too short. But I'm still working with it. I'm going to add those cardstock layers just to keep everything level. And then after I get all of that finished, I change my mind and I end up stamping a new sentiment and making sure to keep it longer this time. See, I'm still struggling adding all those little cardstock pieces, moving it around, and I just didn't like the look. So I even adhered it down. So I put ATG on the back, and good thing it was easy to pull up and it didn't rip the paper. So here's another stamp sentiment, trimming it much longer this time, cutting the fishtail on the left-hand side. And then I will put those scrap pieces of cardstock underneath. So I'll have to put some on the right and left-hand side where it goes over the ephemera and that circle die cut. And this just helps keep all of the layers level. You could use foam dimension, but you always have extra pieces of scrap cardstock lying around, so why not use those instead? So now I can adhere it to the card. I think that looks much better. And finishing touches, I'm going to add some more of the glitter enamel dots using that darker pink color this time. I put 2 in the upper right hand corner. Then I was trying to figure out where I wanted to put the others. I have one next to the happy birthday and decided didn't like that. I'm trying to put some in the lower left hand corner and I didn't like that either. I think I've done a lot of changing my mind on this video. Must be that first set of cards since after Christmas. So I'm going to stick with those 2 in the upper right hand corner, and then I decided to pull out the peel-offs from the kit. I'm using just some of those scrap pieces. I'll put 3 of them to the left of the sentiment. I'm trying to adhere them nice and even. They aren't perfect, but that's okay. So once those are in place, I do decide to bring back those glitter enamel dots. I'm determined to add a few more to the card. So I'll put 1 to the left of that image and then 2 to the right of the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 3. For as much as I struggled over placement on certain things, I really like how it turned out. Now moving on to card number 4. I'm going to use one of the large images from the stamp set. And these are a fun image. They're lightly drawn, so they have more of a sketch look to them. I'm going to use some Versamark ink and stamp it on this green polka dot paper. And I did treat that paper first with some anti-static powder. Now I'm going to use some Love From Lizi embossing powder. This is the Platinum Tiara color. If you're like me and don't color, this is a great way to still use those beautiful stamped images. So let's go ahead and get my heat gun and heat set this. It's hard to see, but I love watching that embossing powder melt. So once that is all set, I'm going to use the coordinating dies that come with the kit. It's always fun when Lizi includes those image dies. I used some washi tape to hold it in place and then ran it through my die cut machine. So there is the cut out image. It does leave that, it wouldn't be a white border, but if you had it on white paper, you'd have that border around the image. So I have some lovely floral paper for the background. I have 2 oval die cuts, one with some of the yellow pearlescent paper, which is part of the add-on, and then the other one in white. So I glue the yellow one down first, and then I'll adhere the white on top, and I'm putting them off center just slightly. I'll put some of that scrap cardstock to the right on that oval, just to keep everything nice and level. Then I'll adhere the white oval on top of the yellow one. Now when I add that pattern paper flower bunch, it'll really pop out against the white paper. Just adhere that using some liquid adhesive. Next, I'm going to add a couple of peel-offs to the lower portion of the card. This is the Mint Moondust color, I believe. I'm going to use the medium and the thinnest width, just putting them on the very lower portion of the card. And I'm not wrapping the ends behind. The Moondust style is just a little bit thicker, so I don't want to have that bump at the bottom of the paper. So I'll just trim them off with my scissors. So then I'll put this panel onto some of the dark green cardstock. And I can put the card front onto a card base. Again, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. It adds a really lovely contrast. For the sentiment, I've already stamped out Miss You, and I used some, like a greenish yellow cardstock. It's some that I already had on hand. I'm going to pop it up using some foam squares, although on the upper portion where it's going on top of the oval, I'm going to add some scrap cardstock. And I do end up putting 2 layers of the cardstock. I like to add the scraps and then I'll hold it up to my card and feel if I need anything more. And then I'll put some more of the foam piece where it's going to go underneath that oval. This is where I realize I'm going to need one more layer of that cardstock just to keep it all level. Remove the backing on the foam, and then I'll adhere it underneath the image. And I did have to put a little bit of liquid adhesive. I was trying to use my ATG, but it was such a tight spot, it ended up pulling up those scrap pieces of cardstock. To balance out the card, I'm going to add a bow in the upper left-hand corner. And this is some ribbon that's included in the kit. I've already gone ahead and tied that bow, just so you don't have to watch me struggle tying a bow. Then I adhered it to the card using some glue dots. Then one final finishing touch, I'm using some of the mini circle gold mirror peel-offs. These add such a beautiful sparkle without any extra dimension. Although I could have had extra dimension since I already have that bow on this card. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 4. Now moving on to card number 5. One of the pattern papers that's included has some fun cut aparts. There were 2 borders that I removed. And then this panel is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 inches. And it has those nice kind of washed out areas where you could add an image or a sentiment. So I have this in my mini Misty, and I'm going to stamp happy birthday 3 times. And I don't have this measured, I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but trying to get it fairly even. I'm going to stamp that final happy birthday. Did have to pull the paper out of the Misty slightly. Once I have the sentiments all stamped out, I'm going to add this panel onto some dark green cardstock. For this card, I won't have any of the card base showing since I did cut that background panel a little bit larger. Now using one of the cut aparts, so this was on the side of the pattern paper, I have a few different floral bouquets, little floral images, and I just matted that on some of the green cardstock. Using some of this peach ribbon, I'm going to adhere it underneath that little image box. So I'll put a piece of score tape down first, adhere the ribbon. I'll wrap the ends around the back of the panel, first with some ATG, just to hold it in place, and then I'll put some score tape on top just to make sure it's not going to slip off later. And I'll remove the backing on the score tape, put more ATG on the back, and I'll adhere this panel onto a card base. And then for this little floral box, I'm going to use some scrap cardstock and put a thin piece above and below where it goes over the ribbon, just trying to keep everything nice and level. I'll use some ATG to attach those scrap pieces. And then put some more on the back and then attach it to the center of that lower box. And finishing touch, I'm using one of the little wreath laurel pieces. Decided to put it underneath the sentiment. I'm going to pop it up using some thin foam squares. I don't want to cover up a lot of this background, but I thought this added a nice touch underneath the sentiment. Then pulling out the glitter enamel dots, I'm going to use the darker green color. I put one in the center of the little wreath branch piece. And then I'll put a couple in the upper right hand corner and then a couple in the lower left hand corner. And here I am again changing my mind on where to put those enamel dots. But eventually I figure it out. There is my finished card, and this is card number 5. Now moving on to card number 6. I'm using a card sketch again. This is MFT 330. I have some fun striped paper for the background, a strip of this floral paper to go across the card, and I'm layering that on the yellow pearlescent cardstock. I was going to add some of the peel-offs around the edge, but I decided I really like that soft look of just that yellow pearlescent paper. I did use a stitched rectangle die to cut out this stripe panel. And I do put ATG on the back, but I'm also going to put a thin layer of liquid adhesive I've noticed when I use the stitched, at least the larger stitched dies, sometimes the edges warp slightly. So I just want to make sure everything will stay in place. And then I layered that on a scalloped rectangle die cut. After I adhere my card front onto a card base, I'll attach this floral panel. And I do have that piece going all the way across the card, so it's 4 1/4 inches wide. I'm going to use another of the floral ephemera pieces, and I'll attach it to a stitched circle die cut. Just use some white cardstock for that. Put my scrap piece of cardstock underneath before adhering it on top of this yellow floral panel. Then I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back of the ephemera piece and adhere it onto that circle die cut. For the sentiment, I've already stamped out Fresh Start. And I was trying to decide if I wanted to put it in the same spot as indicated on the sketch, but I decided to put it a little bit higher. So just use some liquid adhesive and adhere it in place. I cut out a couple of small banners using that same green cardstock. I'll cut one shorter than the other, adhere the first one in place with some liquid adhesive, and then the little piece that I cut off of that second banner, I'm going to glue to the right. That way it'll keep this banner nice and level and it won't dip down off the edge. Try to make sure they're nice and straight. I'm going to use some more of the sequins. Again, I'm just using that cream color. I think it looks really nice with the pattern papers. So I'll put 2 of them on the banners in the upper left hand corner and then 3 in the lower right hand corner. I'll lay them out on my card first, then I'll get my liquid adhesive, and I'm also using an embellishment wand to help pick those up. Makes it so much easier. Just put that small amount of glue, place the sequin down, and then I can use the back side of the embellishment wand to press it in place. So there is my finished card, and that was card number 6. Now on to card number 7, using a sketch from Freshly Made Sketches. This is number 463. This beautiful pattern paper with the white background and pink flowers. And I'm going to double mat this. First on some gray cardstock and then on some of the green pearlescent paper. And this gray cardstock actually has a pearlescent finish on the front, but I'm using the back side since I think the gray matches a little nicer. I did cut out the center from that pearlescent paper, filling it in with some scrap cardstock. Then before I attach this panel onto a card base, I'm going to work on the sentiment. I have one of the cut-aparts in my mini MISTI, and I'm going to stamp Miss You in the center of that floral wreath. Just wanted to make sure to get it nice and straight. And I did trim down this cut-apart slightly. It's square because there's 4 of them on one sheet of paper. But for this sketch, I wanted it slightly shorter. And then last minute, I did decide to add 2 peel-offs to the bottom of this card. I normally would have added them first before adding all these other layers, but I didn't. So instead of wrapping them around, I'm just going to use my X-Acto knife and trim off that right-hand side. And these are the clear silver mirror peel-offs. I think that's the name of them. They're so pretty. They're clear in the center and they have silver foil on the edge. Now I can put my card front onto a card base, and then I'll layer my sentiment image box on some gray cardstock. For those 3 thin strips that go behind the sentiment box, I use some more of that green pearlescent paper. I put some adhesive on the back side of the sentiment panel, and then I'm lining up those strips, following this sketch fairly closely. Then I'll put more adhesive on the back before attaching this piece onto the card. And my focus is trying to get the sentiment box straight, not necessarily those thin strips. So for finishing touches, I'm going to add a couple of the mini heart peel-offs in the silver color. I'm going to put the medium and smallest size above the word You. Just for a little extra sparkle, I'm going to use a glitter brush. This is by scrapbook.com. I'm going to add it to the flowers and some of the leaves. And then after that card sat there for a moment, I decided to add a bow. So I've already tied it. It's this light peach color, the ribbon that's included in the kit. I'm just trying to decide if I wanted above or below the sentiment. Decided to go below. So I just put a glue dot on the back and adhered it in place. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 7. Now moving on to card number 8, I'm using a sketch from MFT. This is number 530. I have 2 different pattern papers for the background, this pink polka dot paper and then a gray and pink floral paper. I think they look really pretty together. So I'm just layering these on some dark gray cardstock. I did cut them a little too short, so I'm just going to add a strip of cardstock between them. Put some score tape on the back and then adhere it to the card. If I'd put the pieces a little bit closer together, I probably would have used one of Lizzie's peel-offs. For the 3 circles, I cut out 2 of them and then just trimmed one of them so you could have that slice of a circle on the top and then the larger piece below. And I used some of that pink pearlescent paper for the circles. This pink matches perfectly with the pattern paper. So I was really trying to stretch it as much as possible. I just used some liquid adhesive to adhere those, trying to get them lined up fairly straight. Once those are in place, I'm going to add the sentiment. Already stamped out happy birthday. I did that on some white cardstock. Trim a fishtail on the left hand side. And I did decide to pop this up using some thin foam squares. I like using the thin foam squares instead of the thicker foam since it's easier to mail the card. I'll just adhere that to the right hand side, having it flush to the edge. And then I'm going to add 2 of the floral ephemera pieces. I'm also going to pop those up using some thin foam squares. And I did speed up this portion quite a bit since you've already seen me put foam squares on the back of other pieces in this video. Adhere the flower on top. I'm going to wait for the bottom one since I decided to add a peel off over this gray strip. I'm using one of the clear silver mirror peel-offs. If I would have thought about it ahead, again, would have wrapped those ends behind, but I didn't. So I'm going to put my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the card base showing. Then I can remove the backing on this second flower piece and then adhere it onto that circle. For finishing touch, I'm going to use some more of the mini circle peel-offs in the silver color. I'm going to put them underneath the sentiment. It's easy to line them up since I'm following the polka dots on that pattern paper. I was going to do 3, but it seemed off, so I decided to go with 5. It's still always better to have odd numbers. And then I'll also use the glitter brush and add it to the flowers. I love that little extra sparkle, and it doesn't make a mess since it's not loose glitter. So there is the finished card, and this is card number 8. Definitely one of my favorites, but do let me know which card is your favorite. Now moving on to card number 9. This card is so much fun, but it did take me forever to make. I'm using the stencil that's included in the kit, and I taped it to some of the yellow pearlescent paper. The kit includes 3 different circle dies, and the medium size matches the circle on this stencil perfectly. So I used that die and cut out a large amount of pattern paper pieces. So I have 3 different pattern papers, and I'm rotating the colors or alternating the colors. So I'm basically using that stencil as a template. So this is my guide for getting all of these little circles nice and straight. And I didn't show that whole process of gluing all of these little pieces down because, like I said, it took me forever. although it took me much longer to cut out all those circles than it did to glue them onto the paper. So there they all are, adhered in place, nice and straight. Makes a really fun background. I'm going to layer this panel on some gray cardstock. Then I selected 2 of the ribbons that's included in the kit, and I'm going to adhere them to the lower portion of the card. Since the ribbons are see-through, I don't want to have those little circles showing through. I'll first attach them to some white cardstock. I put a piece of score tape down first, and then I'm going to put the yellow ribbon down. Then I'll adhere the peach ribbon on top. And I really wish I would have added a scrap piece of cardstock underneath that yellow ribbon. As you'll see it later, there's that noticeable dip on that peach ribbon, so you can see the difference in the levels. This is why I add all of those scrap pieces of cardstock to paper. It's really noticeable on the ribbon. But it was already all adhered, so I'm just going to go with it. Put some more score tape on the back side and then adhere the little ribbon panel on my card. Wrap the ends of the ribbon behind the back of this panel, and then I'll secure them in place with some more score tape. Remove the backing, put a bunch of ATG on the back of this panel. Also going to add a little bit of liquid adhesive around the ribbon just to make sure it's not going to pull away from the card base. And then I'll adhere it onto that white card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch showing. For the image, I'm going to use one of the larger floral ephemera pieces and attach it to a stitched circle die cut. I used some gray cardstock for that. I'm going to pop up this circle using some regular foam tape. Figure this card's going to have a little extra dimension since it took so long to make. Make sure to get really good coverage, and then I'll remove the backing on all that foam tape. Then I'll adhere it to the center of the card. Now I do cover quite a few of those small circle die cuts, but that's okay. I mean, I could have left them out, but I wasn't sure exactly how all this card was going to come together. I just wanted to create that background first and then build the card from there. I'll add the sentiment "Miss You" to the lower left-hand side of the ephemera piece. I'm going to put some of those scrap cardstock layers to the left. But it didn't seem to be enough, so I'm also going to use some dimensional tape. So I'll remove the backing on that and then use some liquid adhesive for the right-hand side and then adhere it to my card. And for some finishing touches, I'm going to add a bow underneath the sentiment. I've already tied it. I'm just trying to figure out placement. I'll put a glue dot on the back and adhere it right underneath that sentiment. I'm also going to add a few of the glitter enamel dots. Trying to wipe away a little extra glue around one of those circle die cuts. I'm going to use the lightest pink color. I'll put the medium and 2 of the small dots on the right hand side of the ribbon. Then I want to add that sparkle, so I'm using the glitter brush, putting it all over this flower. Try to make sure to get really good coverage so it's super sparkly. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 9. And this is also one of my favorites, and not just because it took me forever. Now moving on to card number 10. Using another one of the vellum letters, this time the letter S. I'm going to do a quick fussy cut all around the image, just leaving a little border. I did speed this portion up quite a bit. I do not cut things out this quickly. Now what's really fun about the vellum, as I showed earlier, is you can add adhesive behind the image and it's not going to show, as long as you're really light on the adhesive. I'll be attaching this S onto a white oval die cut. So first I'm going to adhere this die cut onto a green layer die cut. And then I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back side of this vellum. Again, very light layer, and I'm only placing it where there's an image. That way you're not going to see that glue. I'll adhere it in place, try to make sure to get it nice and straight. So now that I have that all attached, I'm going to start working on the card. I'm using a sketch from MFT. This is number 514. I have this beautiful floral paper that'll be the strip going down the middle. And then for the very outside edge, I'm using this green polka dot paper. And I didn't have a full sheet of it, so I just cut 1-inch strips and glued them to the outside edge, since you're not going to see the middle anyway. I will fill in that gap with some extra cardstock though, just to keep it nice and level. Then before I attach this floral panel, even though I was ready to, I need to add those strips that go across the card. I use some more of the pink pearlescent cardstock for that. So I'm trying to get them fairly straight. They're not perfectly straight, but I'm doing my best. So I'll start with the first strip and then line them up based on that one. Got the second one in place. I'll put adhesive on the back side of the thinner strip. Then once those are in place, I can adhere the floral panel. But since it is now going over those other cardstock layers, I want to keep it nice and level. I have one above and below, and then I'll also cut some thin pieces that are going to go in between those pink strips. Once I get all of those in place, I'm trying to make sure everything lines up perfectly so there's not going to be that little bump on the front of the card. Then I can put some more ATG on the back and adhere it to the card. Now once I have this in place, I realized that top and bottom edge weren't perfectly straight. I just used my trimmer to even up both of those ends. Now I'm going to use some of the racing green peel-offs and put one on the edge of the pink pattern paper. Add some really nice contrast. And for that strip on the right hand side, most of it's going to be covered up, so I didn't need to use a full piece. I'll put my card front onto a card base, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Next, I can bring out that S that I worked on earlier, and that's going to go toward the right hand side of the card. I will put some scrap cardstock underneath just that right side of the oval, and then I can adhere it using some liquid adhesive. I did attach that floral panel more to the left rather than straight in the middle as indicated on the sketch, since I knew I was going to be adding this oval toward the right hand side. For the sentiment, I've stamped out Fresh Start, and I used some of the pattern paper that has that watercolor look in the background. I was just trying to figure out where I wanted to adhere those. Since part of the word fresh is going to go off of the oval, I am going to add a foam square. And then I'll just put some adhesive on the right hand side. And then the word start all goes on top of that oval, so I can just use some liquid adhesive. And then I'll attach it right underneath the word fresh. For some finishing touch, I'm going to use some more of the glitter enamel dots, this time that light green color. I'll put 2 of them in the upper right hand corner, 2 in the lower left hand corner. And I also decided to add a few around the sentiment and that large S. Still changing my mind where I want to place those. But there is my finished card, and this is card number 10. And I really like how this one turned out. The pink, that soft green and white looks so nice together. Now here's just a quick recap of the 10 cards I made using Love From Lizi's January 2021 card kit. The theme is Fresh Start, which is appropriate as we head into a brand new year. As I'm recording this voiceover, the kit is still available, but quantities are always limited since it is a monthly kit. The only way to guarantee receiving a kit is to sign up and subscribe. I do have links provided in the description box for the kit and the add-ons I used. Now here's everything I have left over. 3 full sheets of cardstock and a little over half of that gray. I never did get around to using the beautiful vellum. I have quite a few of the pattern paper scraps and 3 full sheets. I have a ton of those alphabet vellum pieces since you get 93. Still have quite a bit of the sequins. Lots of the ribbon. There's 2 colors that I didn't use at all. There's still some of the enamel dots. Most of the sheet of peel-offs. Still tons of ephemera. This kit came with a lot. And there's more ephemera. So there are the dies and of course the stamp set. There's also the stencil that I used as a template. So quite a bit still left over. This really is a beautiful kit. I had so much fun using it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.